And Mary gave birth to her firstborn child and laid the child in a manger. Weeks ago, I was trying to think up an appropriate Christmas gift for my esteemed colleague Lee and her family. Lee has a few obsessions. One of which, as you might have guessed by looking around, is very cool nativity sets. Another obsession which we happen to share is Harry Potter. And so I thought to myself, surely someone has come up with a Harry Potter themed nativity set. Well, I searched Amazon and no. Everything else, but not that. Eventually, though, I found on Etsy a potter who had come up with a Harry Potter nativity and was offering them up for sale. Harry and Ginny were playing Mary and Joseph, of course. The three magi were depicted as Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid. That was kind of nice. Hermione and Ron were shepherds, I guess, which left Draco Malfoy looking on as a kind of a malevolent angel. And who do you suppose was the baby? Who do you think was in the manger, in the space for Jesus? Want to guess? Yeah, no. Yes, Dobby, the house elf! Lying in repose, looking vaguely as he did in that burial scene on the beach, which was a little disturbing, but didn't keep me from ordering one. After all, Dobby's self-sacrifice is just part of what makes him so Christ-like. I got a note from the potter after I ordered, the potter, telling me that the pottery was in process. And then I got a shipping notice from the U.S. Postal Service saying that my package was in transit. But then yesterday morning came an email from the Postal Service headed "Delivery Exception. Your package has a delivery exception." Well, I had no idea what a delivery exception might be. It didn't sound good, though. And reading on, I came to the explanation that my package could not be delivered because my business was closed. Now, I was here at the time. The door was open at the time. People were coming in and going out at the time. This business, if business it is, was open for business. So I suspect that someone was not trying very hard to make space for my delivery. Which brings me, of course, to the Virgin Mary. At the time of that first Christmas, Mary is on the road and she's far from home. She's unmarried and she's pregnant. To make matters worse, suddenly she has what I might call a delivery exception. Now, Luke puts this sort of delicately. He says, while they were there, far off in Bethlehem, the time came for her to deliver her child. She gave birth to a son, and because there was no space, she put him in a manger, in a feeding trough. And so unfolds this familiar story, which we have been hearing again tonight. Mary and Joseph, they just need some space, right? They just need some room in the inn there, some room in this katalumati in Greek, this hostel maybe, or maybe it's more like a guest room, an extra room where people can hang out and sleep over. That might be a closer translation. So don't think of an inn, but some kind of an indoor space with a mat for sleeping. That's just what they need, not what they get, but what they need. Just a sleeping space. Just a corner in an otherwise crowded room would have done it. But according to Luke, nobody makes space. Nobody makes space. Nobody moves over to make space for their weary and expecting bodies. There was no topos, that's the word in Greek, no topos, no place for this couple from away. No space for this vulnerable woman about to give birth. No space for a fetus about to become a child. And here's why there was no space. Here's why there was no space. You know why there was no space? Nobody made space. That's why there was no space. There could have been space. Somebody could have made some space. And nobody made space. Maybe you've had this experience in contrast. The other day I was heading downtown, waiting for the subway, and the train pulled up, and it was crammed full, and nobody got off, and there was no room. And then somebody squished in a little bit, earning dirty looks from his fellow riders, and it motioned me to get onto the train. And so I caught my train, because all I needed was this little bit of space, enough for my body to fit into. And he made space for me, even though there was no room. He created some room for me. And it didn't take very much. It really didn't. But he did it. I sometimes wonder what I can do to change a troubling reality I feel around me. I sometimes wonder what I can do, what I, as a white, privileged, middle-aged, middle-class, cisgender man, what I can do to impact the awfulness of a world that's suffering under the illusion that there's a finite amount of room, that there's only so much space. And I know there might not be much that I can do, but I can make space. I can make some space. I can make sure that there's room for everybody. The only room for Mary and Joseph that night was a space usually taken up by animals. And so Mary gave birth, and exhausted, she used the only space she could find that was up off the dung-filled ground to place her newborn. I don't know, to tell you the truth, how Joseph Moore came up with the idea that that first Christmas was a silent night. Now, I'm a guy, and I've never given birth myself to a baby, but I've been around when a few babies have been born. And it was amazing, and it was moving, and it was a little scary, but it wasn't silent. Silent was exactly what it wasn't. Not at all silent, nope, not that. And where, pray tell, did this little Lord Jesus no crying he makes come from? Now, why wouldn't Jesus cry as a baby? Because we read on in the story, we know that he cries when he grows up. He weeps over a dead friend. He cries over a hopeless, heartless city. He grieves in a garden, telling his friends who weren't being much of a friend, "I'm deeply grieved unto death." Why wouldn't Jesus cry as a child? I try to picture how that birth moment was for Jesus, coming into the world in that extraordinarily ordinary way, that universal way, that way we've all come into the world, pushed out from his space in the quiet of Mary's womb into a reality that was different, into a reality where nobody was making space for him. A baby pushed out into that reality and suddenly shocked by all the sound, shocked by all the noise, shocked by all the light, shocked by the chill of the night air and by the coarse feel of this rough manger that had replaced his soft and warm womb. A baby who will soon find himself pushed out of Bethlehem by an irrational, tyrannical ruler. A child forced to flee to Egypt as a refugee. It's anything but a silent night that night in Bethlehem. Anything but a silent night. My colleague Frank Glass puts it this way in an introduction to his gorgeous arrangement of Silent Night. He writes, "The probability of any child's birth occurring in silent serenity is, well, so small as to be non-existent." We know that. We know that. And yet, maybe because of this improbability, the song Silent Night has a way of capturing the sacredness of a profoundly profane moment. Has a way of epitomizing the sacredness of a profoundly profane moment. The other night, we invited the women who are temporarily homeless and who sleep downstairs to come next door to our home in order to share a dinner that was provided by some of you, to let everybody have a chance to sit someplace close to a Christmas tree and sing a few carols. It was a sweet time. And at one point during the course of the evening, one of the women, Teresa, stood up and she began to sing Silent Night. She got through the first verse beautifully, which is all I could do without the words sitting in front of me. And then she launched into the second verse, which she didn't know. And so she improvised, and it came out like this. Silent night, holy light. She gestured at the Christmas tree. Darkness flies, that's all right. All the virgins gather around the holy infant down there on the ground. Sleep in heavenly peace. I liked her version so much, I jotted it down. Holy light. Darkness flies, and that's all right. For some of us, I know that it's felt like a year of gathering gloom, a time of some darkness. A year when we didn't always know what was going on, what was up, what was happening, what was coming up, what was going to happen. When we didn't know maybe even what should happen. The present seemed pretty gloomy, and the future seemed a little gloomier. I remember at some point this year hearing a talk by Valerie Kaur, a lawyer and activist who lives out her Sikh faith by being sort of an interfaith rock star, if that's a thing. And she posed a question for us in the course of her talk. She said, "I close my eyes and I see the darkness. And I ask this question, what if this darkness is not the darkness of a tomb, but the darkness of a womb? And what if our country is not dead or dying, but is a country just waiting to be born? What if this is our nation's great transition?" she asked. "What does the midwife tell us to do? She tells us to breathe and then push," she said. She said, "Tonight we will breathe, tomorrow we will labor in love and through love." I want to hold on to that image. I want to hold on to that image through the deep and profound darkness of my own life. I want to hold on to that image through the darkness of this night, when the darkness that surrounds each of us is not the dark of a tomb, but the darkness of a womb. On this night, when we are ready with the coming of a child to be open to our own rebirth, the birth of a bit of hope, and through us, the birth of a thrill of hope that can cause a very, very weary world to rejoice. Tonight, as we emerge from this place, as we go out from darkness to darkness, as we leave this great womb, this womb of gentle darkness, let's try to make space for each other. Let's try to make space for everybody. For everybody. Try to make space for refugee bodies forced to flee. Make space for immigrant bodies with no papers who hear there's no room. Make space for Muslim bodies faced with suspicion. Make space for trans bodies needing respect but finding derision and misunderstanding. Make space for poor bodies told they're just not successful. Make space for rich bodies entangled in a sense of entitlement. because that's the message of Christmas. The message of Christmas is that the one who had no room prepares a room for us. The one who had no space makes space for us so that we can make space for each other. Because there is room and there is space. There's space for the lost and the lonely, for the vilified and the vulnerable. There's space for you. There's space for me, for all of us, for everybody. So go out tonight and just make some space. Just make some space, a little space, and let every heart prepare a room, because then heaven and nature will surely sing. Thanks be to God. Amen. Amen.